Welcome tonight, June 10th, the meeting of the Finance Committee, Town of Milford, 7 o'clock, and we'll begin with the minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes that were distributed? Bobby?
Mr. Chairman? Yeah. I know Chairman Shane is not here tonight, but at our last meeting, when we discussed Article 4, he made a comment when we were looking at the overall budget with respect to the disparity between school choice, students coming in as opposed to students going out. And he said that he asked the school committee for some explanation. I'd just like to get it in these minutes that we keep that as an open item so that we don't lose track of it. I think it's, if the chairman took the time to make note of it, then we should follow up on it and have it an item for discussion.
I'll put it down on
you could put it
my
in old
list to
business
chase.
if you'd like.
Just leave it as old business, and I'll chase Mark, and through him, Dr. Tremblay, to say, where's the analysis?
Right. Great, that works.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, Elder.
Bob, why don't you ask for a date specific when you might get something? That way it'll be responded to.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to an end date, but out of respect for the chairman of that committee, who I believe is Mark, why don't we let him see how he feels about it? We could probably bring it up to him at our next meeting.
We can ask him to say we'd like to address it at the September meeting.
Sure.
That gives 3 months. That's
Fine.
Any other questions, Chris?
I definitely agree, and I wouldn't like to go longer than that, because I think it's an excellent point, because to me, something like school choice is a very great indicator on the condition of our town, because if people are school choicing out at such a rate that shows the disparity that we currently have, then we have problems that we need to address, and I think it's a very good point that you bring up, Bob, and I think it should be a sooner rather than later thing that we do as a committee.
I just don't want to lose track of it.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you
We'll leave
more.
it as old business open. Any changes, suggestions to the minutes?
I'll move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Chucky. All those in favor of accepting the minutes? Any opposed? Unanimous. Our first visitor, Miss Sue, from the library, our library director, Sue Edmonds.
Hello, everyone.
Does the sub-chair have any comments?
I'm not sure exactly what you have tonight. I think you just have the emergency transfer request.
Yes, I'm asking for
No,
emergency
only-
transfer.
This is a matter of course of business. I thought those were supposed to come in before the agenda. Do we have to have them on the agenda first?
No.
We
You
don't
have an item to talk
Done that in the
about.
past.
In the past, as long as we've said that it's to deal with an emergency transfer,
Okay.
but we haven't required the exact number, being that it should be an emergency.
The only
So,
thing, one problem, we haven't posted it either. As an emergency.
on the agenda, it was listed as library director presentation.
If you wanna exercise that latitude, that's fine.
I think for an emergency, I'm comfortable with that. If it was just general, then I'd agree with you. Any objections? Sue?
Okay, well, I'm requesting $1,454.50 to cover a emergency expense that we did not plan for in our budget on our buildings and grounds items for looking at the basement floor of the library. One of my custodians discovered a bubble in one of the areas of the rug, and we pulled it back, and we saw that there were some problems that looked like there had been some cracking or whatever in the basement floor, and since the library was built back in 1986, we were concerned that there was something going on with the floor. So I worked with the town engineer, Bonnie Reese, and she brought in the company called WJE that came over and looked at the floor. And they went around and looked at the building specs and looked at the old plans from 1986 and 2007 for the renovation. And they gave us a report that basically said that there was probably a problem with the curing of the cement floor when it was put in, and now it's starting to have some problems with buckling, and it wasn't that bad, but at the same time, we need to keep an eye on it. And also, they suggested that we take a camera and go into the sewer pipe that is also near that area and check and see if there's any debris or anything for structural fatigue with that pipe.
Mr. Chairman?
Aldo?
Was it damp prior to the discovery of the failure of the concrete?
No, it wasn't damp, but we saw where there was some, what they probably had done back in '07 is that it wasn't level at that time because I don't know what kind of fill they used underneath the cement slabs. So after time, from what we've been told, that it settles. And since this is built on granite, they had to do some stuff to make it level initially.
What was the recommendation of the engineering company with regards to, if there's a failure there, I would hate to say that there's a likelihood there may be a failure elsewhere in that area. And if it was a situation where the concrete was not properly cured, then we're looking at problems down the road. Did they recommend any kind of preventive maintenance or follow-up so that next month you're not in again saying we've got another area that's a problem in another area?
They basically said in the report to keep an eye on it and see if it changes. Right now, they're happy with what was there, but they also said we should check out the pipes underneath the slab if we can do it.
Which obviously will be another expense.
Yes, but we don't know yet.
Chuck?
Is this considered a safety issue?
We considered it a safety issue at the time.
Okay, so the 1454 was to generate the report,
Yes,
and the report's been generated?
yes.
And right now, they're not recommending any other expenditures?
No, not at the moment, but they said keep an eye on it, and they did suggest we do the.
But as far as the
other stuff.
emergency, then the 1454 covers us.
At the moment, yes.
And Zach, I believe our emergency fund still has at least $1,500 in it.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, please.
Aldo?
Was there any remediation done to the area that was destroyed?
We just put the rug back, and we,
But if it was a change in elevation, we didn't do anything with regards to filling the area that had cracked or leveling it and putting some sort of a level aster in there?
well, it was considered by the structural engineer came by, is that it's just a tiny little elevation, and that it shouldn't be a worry, but he didn't say anything to
The only
change
thing that
it.
concerns me is
Yeah.
if your custodian saw it as being an upheaval of the concrete, then you really need to keep an eye on it, because if we have to come back and remediate it, once we've identified it, if anyone becomes injured.
Oh, I
As a
agree.
result of that, it belongs to us, obviously.
Okay, Jerry, you had a question?
Two comments. Sue, did someone give you the form to fill out for the emergency transfer request?
Yes, and I gave it to Mike Schiavi, and I sent it to Zach Taylor.
Okay, because none of us have that, and that's normally part of our packet when we sit down. So is it possible we can get a copy of that? If you would, please. The other, that's just part of the procedure. We can certainly catch up on that. My understanding, as in looking, I had the report sent to me by way of an email. And since I can't get online again, I can't sit down and review it with you. The engineer, we deemed it in our meeting of June 1st as a potential public safety issue, and that's when we recommended that Sue Edmonds come in and present it as emergency transfer request, because her budget really doesn't have that extra room in it right at this point in time as we come down to the year end. And seeing as this unforeseen type of situation, I instructed her to prepare emergency transfer request, and I would recommend that we move favorably on the issue.
Is that a motion?
I'll
Please.
second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Jerry, Aldo second. Any other discussion?
So this transfer is for engineering services only, right?
My understanding is.
Not for any repairs or-
For the report.
Yeah, for the report.
We got an evaluation and a report for 1454. That's it.
That's it, okay.
But it's unforeseen, potential public safety issue, and I think what's happened here is we're erring on the side of caution.
No, Jerry, I think the only question is, what was the deliverable? It was the report. We got the report,
I have
so
a great, very detailed report, but I can't. get it.
somehow, I think we'll trust you. Any other discussion? Then having the motion on the floor and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed, unanimous.
Thank
And
you very much.
Thank you.
just make sure, before you leave, that Zach has that form with your signature and all.
Yep.
Then we'll just pass it around, and Zach can implement it tomorrow.
Good.
Great.
Very good.
Okay, next guest, Mr. Chuck. Good evening. I understand you're coming to talk about the bugs who are
I don't know.
eating our
That's what
trees.
Well, it's quite vague when they asked me to come in, but I assumed that that's what they wanted to hear about. And the issue would be winter moth. That's what is defoliating most of the trees in town. There's a few gypsy moths mixed in right now. However, their numbers are so small that it would be negligible. But that insect is now going into the pupation stage, and the damage is pretty much done and over. It's not actively feeding. There may be a few here or there. So we won't be seeing any more defoliation other than what we have already noticed. That moth, they call it winter moth because the adult hatches after Thanksgiving.
Really?
And you see them, we all see them flying around to the porch light, basically, or on the screens in the winter. The little larvae hatch early in the spring before the buds even open. They crawl up and get inside the bud and start to feed. So when the leaf emerges, there's already holes in it. Just like when you were a kid, you cut a snowflake, you take a piece of paper, you fold it up, you open it, there's holes in it.
So I guess the logical question would be, what do we do now?
We don't do anything because 90% of the issues are related to private property.
Mr. Jim,
Aldo?
is there permanent damage done to the tree,
Well,
or is it just seasonal damage?
No, it's very stressful on the tree. It has to put out a new set of leaves, and that's extremely stressful. It's taking all of its stored energy to put out that second set in the same year. And really, the only thing we can do at this point is hope for lots of rain, because we're in such a deficit in rain.
What could we have done earlier?
Nothing. We'd have to spray, and that's not really an option for the town
Why?
to get into that. Well, because as I said, 90% of the issues are taking place
So it's
on
not-
private property.
Okay.
You know, so we really wouldn't want to get involved in that at this point in time.
So in your opinion, major problem, minor problem, annoyance?
It's a major problem. It's spotty in different areas of the town. You get up on the north side, way up Purchase Street, it's pretty light. You get downtown here, there's pockets that are very heavy. Up on Bear Hill, it's quite heavy.
Do you put out an advisory, like if I'm a homeowner?
I usually give Ed Thompson a heads up, and he usually says something about it. He has in the past.
Could I ask that you also include our bulletin board?
Sure.
You know, the Milford TV?
Yeah.
Because as a homeowner, I think it would be nice, town crier. I mean, Al Holman and Kevin have been really good about helping out. But if you put an announcement in there and then list it on the TV, as a homeowner, it would be nice if I knew, okay, I've got these things, how do I know I have them? What do I do about them? And who do I call?
Yeah, you would have to call a for-profit tree care company to come in and spray, and they're all fully licensed and they're well aware of it.
Chucky, again, if you can just write up, you know, here's how you find it, here's what happens, here's the kind of company to contact, that'd be really helpful, I think, to all the homeowners.
Mr. Jim?
Yes, please.
Chuck, is this, I read somewhere that this is like once every few years. Should we expect it again next year?
Oh, yeah, you'll expect it again next
As
year.
heavy as this year? It's the same?
Well, it depends.
sensation?
If we have an extremely severe winter where the temperatures go down well below zero, it will kill off some of the eggs. But, you
So
know,
pray for rain and
that's
pray for
Mother
cold.
Nature. Yeah, if you have a tree at home that you're really, particular to, you really want to get some water to it, and lots of water, on a weekly basis.
See, that kind of information, I think, would be great if you publish.
Yeah.
And again, Rob O'Keefe or Catch Daniel, he'll give you the email, and that way it's up on the bulletin board, and everybody. Any other questions?
No, and I'd like to bring up a new issue. Just recently, we got a call regarding a tree at Vernon Grove Cemetery, which is the town cemetery. It had split in the night, and they contacted me. I went down and looked at it. We had to take it out right away. The cost of removing the tree was far outweighed by the damage it would have done to headstones. However, they do not have any money in their budget. And this year, just in cemetery work alone, I've gone way over 10%. And you know, this isn't North Purchase Cemetery that's extremely poor. So going forward, I would like to have any of this type of work. We'll get the work done, but it would come out of their budget.
Well, I think you should work, who's the subcommittee chair for?
I am, and I have spoken with Chuck regarding this, and I'm in agreement. If he's spending such a large portion of his budget on a department, that department, I think, should be billed for it. I mean, if he's doing a lot of work for the Parks Department, for Vernon Grove, and he's depleting his own, which he's doing, you know, the regular streets of Milford, you know, those departments, I think, should be responsible for the work that's being done. Otherwise, you know, we would have them doing the work, and they're unqualified and everything else, where as Chuck is getting the jobs done by a qualified person, it's done the right way, but there should be some expense involved. It shouldn't be come directly out of his budget, and I've expressed that feeling to him, and I'm expressing it today, so obviously at the pleasure of this board, but I don't think it should all be dumped in his lap every time.
Well, as you formulate your budget for next year, it should have been taken into account, but I would say, if you know you're gonna be doing a lot of work for Department A or B, then let's get the head of each department into a room and talk about how we're gonna deal with. You know, if 20% of your budget is one department,
That's not, yeah.
it's not what you formulated, it's not what you put together, okay, then let's deal with it, because I'd rather do it up front than,
Well, this was an unforeseen circumstance, obviously.
yeah, but the way you're taught, unless I'm not
This was an
understanding.
emergency, we had to have it
But
dealt
that was
with.
the only time that that department caused you work? It sounded like you're doing a lot of work for,
No, in the past, when they've required or requested work, what they do is they come into you people and get the money.
Right.
And
see, and that's what Chris
we
is saying.
administrate it.
If we have legitimate issues that we need to deal with, we allocate the money.
No question. I think unfortunately in these particular situations, I think most of the work that ends up coming up is at the moment. It's an emergency, that type of thing. It's hard to plan, obviously, when a tree is gonna fall down. You know, obviously, a lot of that stuff is unforeseen
They can
events.
come in for emergency transfers.
Emergency
There's no
transfers,
question.
Just like we did.
But this type of stuff is ongoing, and they really should put a little bit of a budget aside on a yearly basis to
Aldo?
deal with
I
it.
think what we should do to facilitate this is, through our budget subcommittee, at least ask them to notify all department heads that have budgets, which might require this kind of work, that is what's going to occur. Now, either Chuck comes here looking for an emergency transfer, which is unfair to him, but the individual department should come in here.
Yes,
Yes.
If they cannot handle it within their own budget.
agreed.
And that, just, let's establish that so we don't have to even visit it again.
Just like the cemetery last time.
Right,
They came, we discussed it. If we allocate money, then you manage it.
right.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Sir Charles.
All right, thank you.
Next item, talk about the IT situation, and I don't expect a long discussion, but Chris, you want to give us a quick?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it quick, and I'm sure it's not gonna go that way, but, unfortunately, we had, the IT director for town, Paul Blivis, submitted his resignation, about, a week and a half ago. So we currently do not have an IT director. Right now, Rick and Bob have been in communication with World Bank Communications, and they have set up basically a temporary IT director type action in which they are overseeing the actions of the town, doing any support that the town needs for it. And Rick and Bob have done a good job to make sure that we've been covered in obviously this bad situation in which we don't have an IT director again. So that's all I have to report.
Well, my understanding is that we had committed to do some work, the loop, and that is going to continue.
Yes, that's obviously a part of the other part of the agenda item was the recommended freeze, but the loop was committed back in February by the school department. Superintendent Tremblay had signed the contract with Comcast for the existing loop that we have been talking about for months now. So to me, that unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, is nothing that I can see that we can put any recommendation in for a freeze. I mean, that that work has been committed to Comcast. The contract has been signed on it. So unless anyone has any comments on that, or Jerry Moody says that we can get out of something like that, I don't think that can be a topic of conversation for any freezing of funds.
Before I get to Aldo, but what I understood from you is that we're not asking to stop any of the work committed.
No, I'm,
It's just not going forward with any new commitments until we have a plan.
that's what's been said to me, and to me, like I said, something like that has been done, put in motion. I mean, obviously, people can speak for their own. I cannot even possibly imagine stopping plans that are already in motion.
You as subcommittee chair, your recommendation would be to continue.
Absolutely, go forward with the loop the way it is.
Aldo?
Chris, what I want to be sure of is the fact that whatever was planned for the new school will continue to be planned, so that we don't open the new school with no ability with technology. So I'd like to have some sort of an assurance from someone that the new building is going to have everything it needs by way of access to service.
Aldo, I think that's absolutely imperative that that happens. I mean, we're spending $62 million, and it's going to be the gem of our schools. 61. And it's going to be the gem of our school. It's going to be the gem of our school system. I'm laughing. And it's imperative, I mean, that the technology is there. And I think that Rick and Bob, I think will work with Worldman and your committee to make sure that support is there, to make sure that the technology is done properly.
Whatever needs to go underground needs to be there, because right now we're pulling boulders and moving the earth.
I think
So
it's
let's
already
get
there,
what's
Aldo.
Okay,
I think it's on the
as
pole.
long as it's,
Yeah, my understanding is inside the building is your group, Aldo.
exactly.
But everything that we committed to outside the building, to bring the pipe to you, is what Chris is saying. We're not trying to go backwards.
No, no.
Jeff?
I just,
Yeah, and I agree with that. Why would we wanna stop the
don't wanna
infrastructure?
wake up.
That's silly.
Whether we have
That's
a new
silly.
IT director or the old IT director, we still need the infrastructure.
we're gonna need the
Once we
roadway.
get a new IT director in place, we're gonna have access to that
I think the biggest comment was things like going forward on new, putting a phone system in that doesn't interface with the current system. That's what worries. That's why I asked Rick point blank. I said, Rick, I'm asking you for your word that not $1 above and beyond this you will approve until we have a plan. Because that's what scares me, is you get all these disjointed fiefdoms, and then we end up paying for it over and over. Bobby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to back up a little bit and say that I would echo the same frustration that the selectmen and the school committee has voiced over many months. And without trying to sound critical, it's embarrassing with the lack of progress that this town has made on the issue. And I would ask these questions to you, Chris, if you have the answers, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Don't put me on the spot.
Are we putting square pegs in round holes? Are we not doing enough vetting of the candidates? Are we underpaying? Are we overpaying? Is it a lack of supervision? Is it too much supervision? How often does this committee get together and meet? And secondarily, we've heard that there's going to be a joint meeting between the selectmen and the school committee. Have you been invited, your committee, to that meeting? A lot of questions.
Yeah, hard to
Well,
gauge,
let's
though.
knock it down. The actual committee, when was the last time it met?
It's been a long time.
Like a week, 2 weeks?
Probably 7 months.
7
How about
months?
the short version, the subcommittee? If the full committee hasn't met for 7 months,
Probably 3 months.
Bobby, I think there's your answer. When committees are meeting once every 7 months, it's gonna be hard to keep track of a
You
fast-moving
can't
train.
manage a process that way. Not that large, you can't.
I think Aldo's group meets more than once every 7 months.
You do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if I was
Well,
going to
there's one other
answer
question.
your
Have you been
question.
contacted by either the selectmen or the school committee? Rick, who's leading that charge to coordinate that meeting?
That meeting has not been scheduled yet, so I would assume Chairman Murray and
And who's gonna take responsibility? Will it be the
Chairman Walsh. Thank you.
Chairman Welch? I mean, who's gonna be the taskmaster here? the selectmen or the school committee or?
Again, that's something they'll have to determine, it has not been determined yet.
Okay.
Can we kind of put that on the fast track? I mean,
They'll probably
it's an
discuss
important
funding
issue.
Jerry, you had a question?
Well, I think the question, I guess, who is the committee is my question, and I guess it's gonna come out in the committee that's going to meet sometime in the.
We'll find out hopefully Monday.
I hope they get it, I hope they meet before Labor Day, because that's what kind of scares me with how everything happens right now, because
Well-
everything will be
Let's do it.
pushed down the road until Labor Day.
Jeff, did you have a question? Everybody?
I have just one
Aldo?
thing. Bobby mentioned a number of issues as questions. And he may well have implied that in his listing. My concern is this is second or third bite at this apple, and I'm wondering, do we know what we want? And are we communicating that with the person that we hire? Because it seems to me is, Al, you called for some sort of a plan.
Well, we all did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And you didn't get it.
No.
So I think when you guys get together, at least identify what it is you're looking for, because Bob said, are we not paying enough? Or are we paying too much? I don't know. And
Supervision.
I guess you need to
know,
decide
what's the supervisory model look like?
and what do we expect from this particular person? So I think we have a few other things. Maybe we should just go back to ground zero, keep doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
but realign our own thought process, so when the next person comes in, the next person comes in with an idea of what we want, and we're just gonna ask this person to get us to wherever it is we wanna be.
There's no question, oh, I'm sorry.
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris had a question for you. The sort of stand-in IT director you're referring to from World Band, does that require additional funding for our World Band contract?
Well, right now, obviously, we have funding from the salary of the IT director.
Well, that would be a transfer from salary over to expense then, wouldn't it?
Yep, yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to end up making some transfers to cover this, as well as there is some money still left in the 155 budget from previous projects that we have in there. So depending on how long this model goes for, obviously, there are gonna be some additional funds that are gonna be needed. Right now, I think it's still too soon, and I don't think that the process that the selectmen have decided they wanna do, I don't know if they wanna immediately hire someone, if they wanna do a long-term. Obviously, that's the selectmen's prerogative. And whatever their plan is for what they're doing, obviously is gonna dictate the funds that are needed for it. So if we're going out and we decide that we're going to pay more money for an IT director, obviously more funds are gonna be needed. If we decide that we're gonna need private consultation on how we're going to hire a tech department, and we're gonna need funds for that, obviously there'll be funds needed for that. So I think, to be honest with you, I hate to say that I don't have the answers for a lot of these questions, but I don't have an answer to a lot of these questions. Because it is too soon. I'm not saying we were surprised by it, but I'm not sure that we have a great plan right now to deal with it, but we're coming up with one.
Is it
so.
safe to say without emotion that the sentiment of this board is money should not be spent until we do have a plan?
That would be our recommendation.
That's safe to say that.
Well, what-
Then that would be our
what Money is
recommendation.
there to spend now. I
There
know we
isn't,
have money
Bob.
for salaries, and you've got some money in there for hardware. Yes, we did approve some hardware.
No, this is above and beyond, let's exclude what we already approved for the loop. I guess spending the money is the wrong word. No commitments should be made of funding until a plan. That would be our recommendation. Yes?
I know we had a kind of brief conversation before the meeting about process and how this, and what, I just want to voice my concern, because I think my colleague, Mr. DeVita, is kind of alluding to it also, is I don't really see a plan. And I think what concerns me is we had an IT director that was trying to build an IT plan around an IT director. And I think the process needs to say, this is what we want for an IT plan, and I haven't seen that. It's actually an engineering plan, IT plan, step 1, 2 through 20 pages, network plans and those kind of things. And then we go hire us an IT director, just like a clerk of the works project, to oversee the implementation of the plan. And I just hope we're not trying to find someone to build us a plan, because we should put up the funds, hire a consultant, go to another town, go to where one's worked or just been done recently, and I hate, and copy somebody else's. If it's we normally lead in these kind of things, and right now, this is uncomfortable for me because we're behind the 8 ball on this one.
Sure.
We're normally out front,
And
following the field, and everybody else
Jerry,
is watching us.
I'm right there with you. I want to
Someone
give,
please go hire me, because I used to know how to do some of this stuff 10 years ago. I was just dangerous, and I don't dare anymore. I used to know how to do this, but 10 years later.
we're recommending new abacuses.
Thank you. Can we not go find, and I hate to use the term.
Well, I would
excuse
say
me for
let's-
doing this,
let's
but
give Rick his-
Let's go find an expert.
Let's give him the week,
Hire him.
and then hear what he's coming back with, and then, yeah,
gonna be cheap.
then we get ahead. Bobby?
Oh, just the one last comment, Jerry. At one of our meetings, and I don't recall whether you were present or not, it's not important, we were asked to come up with a list of questions.
Okay.
And I know that between Alan, myself, and Chris, there was probably 15 to 18 questions. I can tell you for the questions that I raised remain unanswered today.
Okay, so we're on the same wavelength.
Yes. The idea was, this is what we want the IT position, the director, to do. But we never got answers.
Like I said, I don't mean to carry
Yep.
on, but.
No, we don't want to look in the rearview mirror.
I know enough to just be dangerous right now, and I'm feeling a little uncomfortable.
We'll give the selectmen and all time before we comment, so we can have an informed opinion. Next item, we have our recommendation for the minutes, so we're on record. Bobby, budget discussion.
Yeah, just real quick, Mr. Chairman. I was somewhat chided by Chairman Shane in a friendly way, I think, for putting this on the agenda when he reminded me we were not even in fiscal year 2016 yet. That said, the reason I asked to put it on was because our memories are fresh with respect to the budget process that we just went through. And I will speak for myself when I express these comments. I would hope that next year we take a more guided and measured approach when we put together our budget guidelines. I know for me this year, it was difficult, and I spent a lot of time on the subcommittees pounding down a 2% increase in salaries, when we know going in the contractual responsibilities are 3% or more. And I think we spend a lot of time and gyrations pushing to and fro, and at the bottom line, 99 and 9/10 of the time, we fund the budget to meet their contractual obligations. So my plan is next year that we take a more measured approach, a more rational approach. Be upfront, understand we have contractual obligations. If it was a case where we knew we didn't have the money, different story. But I think we should approach it this year and save everybody a lot of time and effort. If we get down the road towards crunch time and we find we can't fund it, then we go to look for ways to cut. But up front, to say, I'm only gonna give you 2% on your expenses when you've got a contractual obligation that's 3.5, maybe 4 with lane changes and everything else, in my view, is not the road to
And I
take.
think,
Anyone have any comments?
well, I brought that up too, because my concern was, I keep hearing steps and
Lane change.
lanes and chutes and ladders and all this stuff, and at the end of the day, if we decide as a group we're gonna recommend 2%, then I don't wanna hear about chutes and ladders. The whole budget is 2%. That way it's known. But if we're gonna really say, we're not gonna force layoffs, we're not gonna force these things, and we can survive with a 3.2, then I agree with you. I'd rather be upfront and say, I'm not gonna try and micromanage union contracts with chutes and ladders. You spent $100 last year on all your salary. This year it's 102 or 103, but then we live to what we say. Because I know I got confused when we heard 2%.
Yeah.
But the lanes, the chutes and ladders went up 2%. But all the people went up faster.
Yeah, we know we have a situation with the fire department and the police department that we're locked into, that forces layoffs if we opt to do Plan B. If it's that distasteful to the right people, then we need to work to negotiate that language out of the contracts. I'm not advocating that, I'm just stating a fact. But I think it adds to our integrity when we know firsthand, and we know that the money is there, let's not go the 2% route.
Well,
Let's be upfront.
Again, you call the ball and you live to the call. I agree with you, because then we're transparent. we just talked, Chris and I, as part of Capital, how we talked to Chief Tui, Rev 2, about doing a study, because you can close the dispatchers, but it has ramifications.
It has a-
Nobody can tell us you cannot.
That's correct.
That is not an
That's correct.
accurate statement.
Correct.
How distasteful it would be
You are right. If we don't fund
is
it,
what we should, in my mind, as a FinCom, be able to tell the taxpayers. The reason we're going with a 3-point whatever is the fact that if we went the other way, here's what it would cost, here's the ramifications. So I believe we will do those studies this year,
They've
because I'm
been
calling
done.
for them.
They've actually been done. The
Well, I want
police
it
and fire
updated
chief
and
have done it.
published.
Yeah.
we've actually done those things.
Aldo.
Chairman, if what I'm hearing tonight is the same thing that we've been hearing for the last few years with regards to what you refer to as chutes and ladders, how appropriate would it be for us, as finance committee people, to seek a seat at the table when negotiations are going on, so that we may be able to have some input with regards to the outcome of the negotiation? Because what's happening now is others negotiate the contracts, and this group makes recommendations as to how to fund the recommended, whatever, that came out of the contract. There might be some wisdom in someone, different individuals sit with the people that are negotiating, say, listen, folks, when we talk 2%, we're not really talking 2, we're talking 4, 5, and 6. And there's a little pushback.
Aldo, I can't think of anybody at this table more experienced to explore that. When I think of, Bobby, how many school negotiations for
Ad
salary
nauseam. Ad
have
nauseam.
you gone through, right? None.
Oh, no,
Chucky,
none.
Now, if I look around the table, there's only one of us that's been involved. So
True.
I love the idea of you exploring it.
That'll
Jerry.
teach you to bring up a good point.
Just, as we work toward the 2%, I don't have a problem with the 2% as long as it goes across all departments and we hold to it as best we can. The problem that I'm seeing, and I think if you want to come back at this whole thing called the budget process, whether it's 2016 or 2017, is we've got a budget crunching, a budget driver that we're not addressing, and that is headcount. We've got headcounts that are slipping up, 1 and 2 at a time, here and there, okay? And that pushes the salaries and wages line up also. The other thing is we're not realizing if somebody retires at the higher end, we should be replacing those people with lower wages, okay, to get some kind of relief on that big salary line. Another thing we gotta keep in mind is when you add that head count, we're also adding a huge number over here on benefits
Right.
and healthcare. Huge number that just kind of falls off the table when the school department budget comes into play. Again, I've asked for this in the past, and it just seems to fall off the table.
And I think we should address
We
it, 'cause
need to know, how many people did you have in your department last year on a spreadsheet for the whole town?
agreed. And I think what Dr. DeVita's getting to is our credibility is hurt when we say 2%, and Sue comes says, I hit 2, but wait a minute, Department B
Well, she
got
did-
3.5.
No, she did better than 2. She
Well-
came in at .7. She did
But
a hell of a
again,
job.
the fact she did is admirable, hats off. But
Because she did it the way I foresee that it would happen. She had some higher end people leave, or that left, okay, and she was able to replace them.
Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, and I think it's extremely important that we do the study, because then we have a lot of people that also think of things like Jerry said, where someone at the top of the scale retired and a younger person came in, and you say, well, there's big savings there. But the thing that comes out is that the fact that these young people now start moving at large increments. When they start moving up steps and lanes at such a rapid pace, whereas the person who left there had nowhere to go.
he was capped out.
They were capped out. So when you're looking at the raise, that's why the study is important, and it needs to look at that, because the average person would say to yourself, well, I have a younger person now. I'll be saving money. Well, actually, they're the ones that actually move faster. And those are the people that you look at when they start to see 8, 10, 11% raises, because they got masters plus 45 and
Chris,
they moved
even
up
if
a
they
step,
don't,
so.
what I found interesting is, let's say you take a $60,000 employee. With benefits, they're 80. They retire. You hire a 30. With benefits, they're 50. The problem is the health benefits for the employee A, we still pay.
Yep.
So when you replace it with a 30, plus 20 for the benefits,
Yep.
plus 20 for the retiree,
Yep.
you're replacing an 80 with a 70. The fallacy is when somebody looks and says, well, we're replacing it with a 30. 3 years later, the 30 is at 55, and you really haven't saved any.
The delta's
And
non-existent.
you got a legitimate point. Head count
Head count
is
where
what
it is.
drives it.
Yes.
Because a $10,000 incremental difference isn't gonna make or break a budget. Any other questions before we move on? Chuck?
Aldo, are you saying that you're advocating that a member of this committee be a member of the negotiating team?
At least sit in on it.
Well, we've tried this on my over 40 years on this committee. I don't know how many times we've tried it. And sometimes we never got an answer. Sometimes we just got a no, and that was it.
Well,
I mean, you know, you could try it, but it's not the first time it's been tried.
But Chucky, we got somebody who,
Right.
if Aldo comes back and says it can't be done or shouldn't be done, I'm gonna have a lot more confidence in that recommendation than if me or Chris did, because we know nothing about the school.
Right.
You know, okay. We do need a vote from the committee to empower the executive committee,
So
once
moved.
elected,
So moved for the-
to conduct business.
Second,
for the
Okay,
summer.
we have a motion from Jerry, a second from Aldo. Any discussion?
Don't spend too much money.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of information for everyone else out there, this is the committee can act on behalf of the full finance committee.
Yes,
And generally, whatever they do comes back in September.
to be ratified.
Ratification.
I mean, normally, the exec committee will not take on non-essential broad issues. But if something does happen which requires immediate action, and obviously we'll meet during the summer as exec committee, and everybody has always been welcome. You know, it's not like, okay, we have an exec committee and nobody else comes.
A good example would be the tree warden coming in for $1,000 tree takedown.
A tree falls down, we gotta deal with it, the exec committee will. Okay, any other questions, then? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. The only old business was put on for tonight, which is school choice analysis that I know of. Is there any new business? Then I will ask for a motion to suspend the full finance committee meeting and turn it over to the good Dr. Chaky as the nominating committee.
So moved.
Okay, we got Bobby and Chucky as a second. All in favor of temporarily suspending? The meeting is suspended, and Aldo, it is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we do at this point in time is, I've asked people to indicate to me their choice, if they would like to seek one of the directing officers of this particular committee. And they have, those that have submitted their names, I'm prepared to put their name in nomination this evening, Mr. Chairman. For the chairman's position for fiscal 16, I'm prepared to nominate Mark Shane to serve in that role for fiscal 16. And I will accept any other nominations from around the table that anyone might like to put in.
Isn't there anybody else that's gonna do this job? It's really unfortunate.
Hearing no other nominations, I will close the nomination, and on behalf of the Finance Committee, I will cast one vote for Mr. Shane, who will become the chairman for fiscal 16. Moving on to the vice chair, I've had one individual express an interest, Chris Moran has expressed an interest in serving as the vice chair. I'm prepared to place his name in nomination for the position of vice chair. I'm prepared to accept any other nomination for vice chair at this point in time. Hearing none, I am prepared to close the nominations for vice chair, and on behalf of the full finance committee, cast one vote for Mr. Moran to serve as the vice chair for fiscal 2016. The next group will be the executive committee. In this one, we vote for 3 people. We have 5 on the executive committee. By virtue of their position as chair and vice chair, those 2 gentlemen will serve on the executive committee. I'm prepared today, Mr. Chairman, to nominate Alberto Correa, Phil Silmacola, and Robert DeVita as, place their names in nomination to serve as members of the Executive Committee for fiscal 16. I'm prepared to accept any additional nominations at this time. Having none, I will close the nominations, and on behalf of the full committee, cast one vote for Al, for Phil, and for Bob to serve as members of the Executive Committee for fiscal 16. There you have it, Mr. Chairman. I turn the meeting over to you.
We need a motion to close your meeting and turn it back.
Motion to,
Second.
Call for a vote, Aldo. Aldo needs call for a vote.
Oh, I'm
Close.
sorry. All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, hearing that, we now open the full Finance Committee meeting again with one last item.
What's that, adjournment?
Need a motion?
Motion.
Need a second?
Yeah, that was easy.
Adjournment cannot be debated, therefore, all in favor?
Have a nice summer.
Good summer.
Have a good summer.
Unopposed? Have a good summer.